interrupt this program to bring you Courage, the Cowardly Dog Month.
Whole month of Courage, the Cowardly Dog. First appearing in 1996, it was picked up by Cartoon Network, who work in the middle of Burbank, and directed by cartoonist John Dilworth. Though many years have passed since the original air date, it's now time for Zach Morris to celebrate this great show.
Well, old sport, what do you think? Me. Hey guys, Zach Morris here, and welcome back to Courage Month. So, today's reviews we're going to be reviewing are Rumpelstiltskin and House Calls. So let's get into both of those. Okay, so this first episode, Rumpelstiltskin, is just a retelling of the classic story of Rumpelstiltskin, the guy who makes deals with people, and you have to guess his name to get out of him. But with like a Courage the Cowardly Dog twist to it. So, yeah, this story is very similar to that. So if you know that story, you'll probably be fine. But for those who don't know what the story is, Courage the Cowardly Dog is a great way to kind of learn that story, kind of, sort of, because it is, as far as I know, fairly faithful to it. I think probably not, but it is interesting that they do make a reference to it. But in any case, the episode opens up with Eustace, Muriel, and Courage in the middle of eating breakfast, or rather, Muriel's in the middle of making breakfast, and Eustace is trimming his toenails into Courage's dog bowl, which obviously is very disgusting to Courage. At which point, there's a knock at the door, and Muriel asks Eustace to go get the door, while Eustace tells Courage to go get the door. So, long story short, Courage is just asked to open the door indirectly through Muriel, and he does it, and that turns out who's at the door is a telegram deliverer who Courage then brings the telegram, picks up the telegram from, and then gives it to Muriel, and after opening, she discovers it's from her great uncle Angus in Scotland. But then she remarks that she didn't even know she had a great uncle Angus, and upon continuing reading, she discovers that all but herself actually died as the last of the people who actually know her family's pattern, her family's kilt pattern. So she needs to come to Scotland right away to actually kind of preserve the memory of it. I think. So she actually just kind of picks up the frame off the wall, and gets ready to pack to go to Scotland, with Eustace staying behind because, in his own words, he hates Scotland. So in any case, they get on a plane and fly to Scotland, where when they get out, they discover a short little man who Muriel reasons is probably her great uncle Angus. So she proceeds to go and greet him, and he her. And he tells her that, and the little man is actually, great Uncle Angus. I'll get to that in a minute, but great Uncle Angus actually points out that he notices she has the family quilt pattern in her suitcase, which Courage is currently carrying around, and decides that's good and that they're going to need that. And then he proceeds to take them to his castle, where he brings them up to the room which Muriel notes doesn't have a bed, with great Uncle Angus just kind of slapping his forehead in kind of mock surprise, pointing out that he shouldn't have forgotten the bed. But in the meantime, he points out that she should probably get to work, and tells her to start making a kilt right away, which she does. She has Courage feed her some wool from a nearby sheep, which is very kilt-like. It has a very kilt-like pattern on it, which isn't how sheep work, but it's Courage the Cowardly Dog. It's a cartoon made for kids, so I'll allow it. So in any case, they start working on a kilt, and after a while, they actually wind up making one successfully, with great Uncle Angus actually checking in to check in on them and see how they're doing, and Muriel then presents him the kilt and points out that she made it with love and in every stitch. And you actually used the weaving, and that she's actually very proud of the work that she's done. At which point, the short little man actually remarks that that's very good, and then tells her to make 4,999 more. Which Muriel doesn't, which is an impossible task, but and Muriel doesn't even fully understand what he's asking until after she starts talking. She very much points out that after she gets a break and some tea, she'll be more than happy to get to work on it. But then she realizes what he said and looks at him like he's crazy. But he merely remarks that he has outlet stores to fill, and that's more of a supply and demand thing where he demands something and she supplies them. But she merely remarks that he shouldn't be doing this kind of thing to his own family. At which point it's revealed that this guy is indeed not Great Uncle Angus, and that she never did have a Great Uncle Angus, and merely tells her to get to work again. But Muriel then proceeds to kind of point out that he's a little bit rude, and also asks for his name since he didn't actually say it. But he points out that that names aren't really important, or rather, he points out that it's never mind about his names, and tells her to just get to work. And when she points out that she actually that she's actually refusing and asks him what he'll do if she doesn't, he merely after saying like a profanity of a string of kids TV friendly profanity, actually remarks that he'll turn them into a shepherd's pie if they don't actually get to work, with her realizing that he's really a nasty man at heart, and proceeds to point that out to him, at which point he just tells her to get to work and storms out of the room. At which point Muriel remarks where she's actually supposed to get the wool to make 4,999 more kilts. At which point the little man actually provides an answer to her by catapulting some sheep into the room for her to use. So yeah, and then he tells her to be done, and then he just hollers at her from the ground to be done by sunrise. So she merely remarks that there has to be a way to get out. And they look around only to discover that the little man has actually closed off the gate to get in and out of the castle, and obviously they're not going to be able to get out that way. But Muriel remarks that it's too high. It remarks that she can't actually jump out of the tower since it's too high for her to jump, and tells Courage that he'll have to do it, which causes Courage to panic a little bit because he realizes he's going to hurt himself. But she merely remarks that she'll merely lower him down by her hair like Rapunzel, which it obviously isn't going to work because obviously her hair is very short. So yeah, Courage just winds up falling off the tower anyway, and winds up hurting himself, and in his daze winds up wandering into the man's moat. At which point he gets hit on the head by the what was it, the drawbridge. And it's revealed that the little man has actually kicked out his own mother for uttering his name in her castle, which gives Courage an idea, and he realizes he can actually use that to his advantage to actually get the little man's name. So he winds up creating this big thing where the man has actually won a $1 million cash check in the mail. And Courage just plays a recording on a boombox, but basically the trick he's trying to pull is that the man has to sign his name in order to complete the check, but the man just signs cash and then drags the check off. At which point it's revealed that Muriel has since gotten 3,000 something in the 3,000 number. I don't remember, but she's gotten at least 3,000 of the kilts done, and it's starting to get dark. But in any case, Courage feels dejected and starts sitting on a trash can trying to figure out how we can actually figure out the man's name. At which point the man's mother just outright tells Courage. She actually walks up to him, pointing out that she feels like that she doesn't really understand why he's upset with his own name, and even points out that she actually gave him a very proper name, and that she was very proud of the name that she gave him, and then proceeds to whisper in Courage's ear, which Courage then realizes he can now use this information to actually maybe defeat the little man and get them to go home. At which point he proceeds to run into the tower where Muriel's only made like 4,329 of the kilts she needs to make. And Courage then proceeds to try and tell her the man's name so that she can actually possibly escape. But she doesn't. But obviously, this is kind of a recurring bit that has gotten increasingly more common as the series has gone on, because after the first season they decided Courage needed to talk less. For some reason, I don't know why. But because Courage only ever really speaks when he's directly addressing the audience and nobody else, it just comes out as a bunch of gibberish talk, and Muriel is just barely able to understand him. At which point, the little man actually storms into the room and asks to know how many kilts she made, pointing out that if she made less than 5,000, he'll turn her into a shepherd's pie. But she then just points to the actual number that she made, the 4,000 number, but that I only memorized enough to mention once and then never again, because it's a big number. And then proceeds to point out that she doesn't want that she needs more time to make the rest of them, but then Courage actually gets an idea on how he can actually reveal the man's name without speaking, if he can't actually tell Muriel directly. And what he decides to do is actually play a bit of a game of charades. He makes one word 3 syllables. And the first syllable is rump, which obviously the guy's name is Rumpelstiltskin because obviously it's on the title card and it's the name of the episode. But in the context of the episode, Muriel doesn't know that, so which is hence why there's a charade game in the episode. So Courage actually points out the first syllable is rump, with him slapping his ass to actually point that out with the man not actually getting it and Muriel understanding that the word is actually supposed to be rump. At which point Courage then goes into the second syllable, which is old. And the man actually gets it immediately, and then for the third one, Courage decides to actually pull out one of the kilts and actually wear it, but neither of them actually understand what it actually is, since obviously he's dressed himself up as a girl, and they think he's a girl, trying to be a girl, so Courage actually decides to do something drastic that he hoped he wouldn't have to do, which is he leaps into the weaving machine and gives himself kilt skin. Basically, he just leaps in the machine, and turns his skin into a kilt, which sounds painful, and it probably was if Courage is grunting while he's in there is anything to go by. But he then leaps out, and it's revealed, and Muriel is able to guess the word after that. At which point she starts putting them all together, and the man quickly realizes that Courage is too late. That Courage has actually told Muriel his name. And he winds up becoming increasingly upset as Muriel puts it together and eventually realizes that the man's name is Rumpelstiltskin. But then wonders what the word actually is, at which point Rumpelstiltskin just outright tells her that it's his name. And obviously it was being very coy to actually hide the fact that that's his name, even though it's in the title card, but it is the characters don't know what his name is until the end of the episode, so I figured in my review I would just keep that information secret until it was time to reveal it. But in any case, Rumpelstiltskin merely remarks that now that they know his name, they can no longer stay there, and tells them to get out. But Muriel merely points out that that's a lovely name and doesn't understand why he's so upset and doesn't see anything wrong with it. And at which point Rumpelstiltskin tries to get into a bit of a huff and tries to demand them to get out again, but instead he just breaks down sobbing because he points out that he doesn't like the sound of his own name. So he doesn't like the name and doesn't really want people uttering it in his presence because he doesn't like his own name. At which point Muriel suggests that he actually changes his name, with Rumpelstiltskin being a little confused because he didn't realize he could change his own name, which is a thing you can do. You can legally go to a courthouse and have your name legally changed. I think Regular Show did a plot on that as well, where Rigby changed his name to Trash Boat and it wound up causing chaos. In any case, Muriel then decides to suggest a new name for Rumpelstiltskin and actually rearranges the letters in his previous name to make the more iconic Rumpelstiltskin, which seems to satisfy Rumpelstiltskin, and he's happy with his new name, and then proceeds to suggest that he and Muriel actually go into business together as full partners, which Muriel is more than happy to do, and then Courage plays us out with a piece on a bagpipe, which has been playing in the background, and it's implied that it was implied that somebody was actually playing a bagpipe the whole time, and then Courage just outright tells us, yeah, that's exactly what was happening. But in any case, this episode is just interesting in that it's a retelling of the story of Rumpelstiltskin. Or more accurately, an origin story, I think, because she gets his actual iconic name in the episode, Yeah, it is interesting in that the man is just, and that Rumpelstiltskin is just it's just a retelling of Rumpelstiltskin. That's all the episode is. There's nothing really I can tell. It's just the story of Rumpelstiltskin with Courage the Cowardly Dog characters in it. That's all it is. That's all it is. It just tells that story, and then there's nothing wrong with that. I do indeed like the episode, and I do like when people actually kind of draw inspiration from old fairy tales, because technically speaking, if you want to think about it, fairy tales are kind of pop culture if you think about it a little bit. But in any case, it's just interesting that that John Dilworth and his team just kind of kept that legend going in their cartoon, and I kind of like that. But in any case, that's my review of Rumpelstiltskin. On to the next review. Okay, so this episode, House Calls, is interesting in that it marks the story of the time the Bags actually had their first neighbor, which is kind of a fun little story, but also kind of a bit of a sad story as well, because it is very wholesome as a story, but the antagonist of the episode is less so. So it starts off with introducing us to Dr. Gerhard von Orbestein, who as I mentioned, is the Bags' first neighbor, and it's kind of through his own intervention that the Bags become his first neighbor. So he actually created an invention to actually lure neighbors to his house. And kind of the idea is that he's going to use it to actually bring himself some neighbors. With him immediately conversing with his house, who is revealed to be sentient, and tells his house that he's tired of being alone with it. So he's tired of being lonely. So hence why he invented a thing to help him have neighbors. And then it's revealed that his invention is actually a modified gramophone, which he then plays the titular song House Calls on, which then proceeds to play music. And the music then proceeds to reach out to any houses that seem to be nearby. And it eventually does reach the Bag farmhouse. Courage is actually woken up in the early morning by it and tries to explain to Eustace and Muriel what's actually going on, but they don't fully understand. They hear the music as well, but they don't fully understand what's going on. At which point the house suddenly starts moving. Which catches them off guard, and all of their stuff starts flying around, and they start flying around the house as well. But at which point the house actually grows, their farmhouse actually grows legs and starts walking away from their property. Which kind of unnerves them a little bit, and Eustace even remarks that somebody's moving the windmill, but merely remarks that they're the ones that are moving, and then that Eustace seems to have grasped that fundamental, not fully understood that concept or grasped it. But in any case, the house continues to walk away from their property, and the constant undulation actually causes the Bags to start feeling a little bit sick. Eustace, Muriel, and Courage all kind of flop down against the bed, pointing because they're feeling a bit nauseous. But eventually, the house stops moving, and then there's a knock at the door. And Muriel absolutely wonders who could actually be at the house. So Muriel actually pops down to actually go and see who it is, and at which point Dr. Gerhard actually introduces himself. He introduces himself as Dr. Gerhard, with Muriel being and also introduces himself as their neighbor, with Muriel merely remarking that she's happy to have neighbors and a doctor as their first neighbor to boot. So, but Eustace is less enthused, pointing out that he only was mainly because Dr. Gerhard actually came to them with a basket full of sardines, because according to what's at the beginning of the episode, that's the only thing he has to eat or offer. So he brings it to their house as an offering. And Eustace just kind of swipes and slams the door in his face, but Muriel opens up again to continue their conversation. And when Dr. Gerhard actually reveals that he is indeed a doctor, Eustace merely remarks as to whether or not he has a knife to actually open the can of sardines he brought over. When Dr. Gerhard remarks that he does not, he then proceeds to actually slam the door and get Dr. Gerhard's face again. With Muriel then proceeding to open it and apologizing on her husband's behalf, and actually starts calling him doctor, but he merely responds that she can call him Gerhard, and she then proceeds to invite him in for a cup of tea so that they can kind of catch up and get to know each other. At which point, Courage hears a weird noise and notes that that Gerhardt's house actually seems to be growling. So Courage proceeds to actually go and investigate. And despite his best interest, he notes that something is very off about the house. But nobody seems to know. But he doesn't. But he's not entirely sure what it is he's actually hearing. So he goes to investigate and gets closer to the house. At which point, the house kind of flicks Courage with one of its shutters, and he goes flying into the side back farmhouse. At which point, Courage then proceeds to run in and tell Muriel and Dr. Gerhardt what's going on, or at least he tries to get her attention. But they're too busy actually conversing with each other and actually figuring out what they each do to actually notice Courage is there. And in the process, we actually find out that Gerhardt is actually a sound doctor, hence why he created a gramophone to actually lure neighbors in. That's what his profession of choice is. At which point, Muriel realizing that Dr. Gerhardt isn't indeed the kind of operational doctor she thought she was, realizes that she was mistaken and just apologized. But she does point out that it is a very interesting doctorate to have, to be a doctor of sound. But in any case, there's then another knock on the door, and Muriel finally gets up to go investigate who it is. And it turns out to be Gerhardt's house. So she remarks that that Gerhardt's house doesn't seem to be very happy. And Gerhardt then merely responds that she's doing it again. And when Muriel is confused and asks him to explain, he merely remarks that lowering the Baggs farmhouse to his own house so he can have neighbors isn't the first time he's used sound technology to do something magical and mystical. As it turns out, he used his abilities to actually, he used his technology to actually bring his house to life so he wouldn't be lonely, but it wound up having the opposite effect, because yes, he no longer is lonely and has a friend, but now his house is driving off any potential neighbors that he could potentially have, and he's not allowed to have friends. And then remarks that she wants him to come home, at which point a large tongue actually winds up sticking out of the house and dragging him inside, and with him merely complaining about why he's not allowed to have neighbors. But in case with Dr. Gerhardt now back in its possession, the house then proceeds to openly assault the Baggs farmhouse with all of its various bits and pieces of the house. It actually starts by poking the Baggs farmhouse with a support beam, and just starts slapping the house with it. With the house starting to shake, and Muriel uses and Courage kind of cowering for safety because their house is currently being attacked by another house. So yeah, and then Eustace goes to the window and deciding that enough is enough, and demands that the house stop attacking his farm. But Gerhardt's house immediately responds by poking him with the support beam through the window and sending him flying into the wall. So, and he winds up getting stuck in there, might I add. At which point Dr. Gerhardt tries to plead with its house to stop doing what it's doing, but the house doesn't listen and proceeds to start shooting bricks at the house to actually kind of punch more holes in it. And then sends its wind vane in after the Baggs to actually kind of take them out, which it's very terrifying. They're basically being attacked by a wind vane with a chicken on it, and it's very, very terrifying. But in any case, Courage then proceeds to pick up Muriel and carry her into the basement, with Eustace following shortly after he frees himself from the wall, and he proceeds to follow his wife and Courage into the basement. At which point, the house proceeds to continue its assault on the Baggs farmhouse, with Muriel realizing what might actually be causing the problem. That maybe that it's possible the house might be jealous of their own house, because her obviously, and I've kind of pictured it, but by Muriel's own admission, Dr. Gerhardt's house is a mess, and while the Baggs farmhouse isn't perfect, it certainly looks a hell of a lot nicer. So, and Muriel remarks that maybe a good sprucing up would actually calm the house and stop it from attacking their own. So, at which point Courage notices several paint cans lying nearby and in the basement, and decides to actually take up the idea of actually going to paint the house to actually placate it and stop it from attacking them. So what he does is he picks up all the cans of paint, and he winds up putting on a painting uniform which is nearby. He puts on a smock and hat, which wind up being next to the paint for whatever reason. And he then proceeds to carry the cans of paint upstairs as the house continues to assault the Bag farmhouse, but now launching its fence posts at it to try and hit them in the basement. And also at one point the windmill vein actually winds up getting down there as well and starts attacking them that way. But Courage then proceeds to start painting the house and starts painting it a lovely shade of pink. He pulls out the pink paint, starts painting it all over, and while it doesn't completely stop the house's assault, he is able to actually calm it enough that he's able to actually get inside. And after Dr. Gerhardt greets him through the window, Courage then proceeds to hand him the other can of paint he brought, and Dr. Gerhardt realizes what Courage is doing and decides that painting the house is actually a lovely idea. And as they're actually painting the inside of the house, he remarks that he probably should have done this years ago. But in any case, they actually start sprucing up the house on the inside with Dr. Gerhardt merely remarking that this is the happiest he's seen his house in years. So eventually Gerhardt's house actually stops attacking the Bag farmhouse, and the windmill vein eventually stops attacking them and returns back to the roof where it belongs. With Muriel merely remarking that the assault seems to have stopped, and they go upstairs to actually investigate. And sure enough, they actually notice that the house is a lot nicer to go in, and Dr. Gerhardt actually invites them into the house and shows them all the hard work that they did actually sprucing the place up. And long story short, the house was originally a mess, but now it is a very nice house that actually looked like it's fun nice to live in, and actually looks like people would actually enjoy coming over for a visit. While Eustace is less than amused because it's Eustace, he only really wants to know if Gerhardt has any more sardines he can have, but merely remarks that the house looks lovely now, and does remark that it actually does look a lot nicer than it used to be. At which point they hear construction outside, and in no time at all, a neighborhood has actually sprung up around Dr. Gerhardt's house, with Dr. Gerhardt just being happy that he has more neighbors. At which point he opens the door and he's greeted by the mayor, who once again is sporting a completely different design, just further emphasizing the fact that he may or may not exist, because the plot seems to be that he exists when the plot needs him to exist. So sometimes he exists, sometimes he doesn't, and almost always he has a completely different design. But in case he then proceeds to greet Dr. Gerhardt, revealing that he's actually mayors with the neighbor now, which is kind of neat and kind of nice. But then he also points out that their new neighborhood actually isn't zoned for farmhouses, and that unfortunately the Bags are going to have to move their farmhouse back to where it originally was, or risk having it torn down and destroyed. So Muriel points out that it's probably time for them to head off, but Dr. Gerhardt remarks that he doesn't want them to leave because he wants them to be his neighbor, but Muriel merely remarks in response that they'll always be his neighbor, and remarks that that true neighbors aren't actually separated by miles, and that they will continue to be neighbors even if they're separated by hundreds of thousands of miles. And but in case the Bags have one last heartfelt goodbye, and the house actually decides to lick Courage with its carpet tongue to actually thank him for painting it and fixing it up. With Courage being happy and amused that the house likes him now. And then the Bags farmhouse actually winds up collapsing. So because it just got assaulted by a bigger house. So yeah, it just breaks down and collapses. But it's implied that they do eventually fix it in the next episode. But in any case, that's how the episode ends. So this episode overall is just very wholesome. It's just about how the Bags have their first neighbor, which if you guys know, they don't really have because they live literally in the middle of nowhere. But I actually decide to actually fix up Dr. Gerhardt's house when they find out it's a mess, and the end result is that Dr. Gerhardt actually winds up having neighbors, even if he has to say goodbye to the Bags. So yeah, this whole episode overall is just about Dr. Gerhardt being the Bags' first neighbor, and ultimately they help him get more neighbors via Courage fixing up his house to make it look nice. Now Dr. Gerhardt actually is no longer lonely. He has neighbors, he has friends, he's happy. But yeah, this episode is just interesting for that. It's the story of the Bags' first neighbor, and I kind of like that. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching this review. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below if you want to keep up to date with what's going on the channel. Be sure to check that out. Link is down in the description. Also, be sure to check out my Twitch if you want to help support me that way. I stream every Sunday, 2:30 Eastern Standard Time. If you guys want to actually see that, be sure to check that out so you don't miss it. And just be sure to follow me over there. And also, if you want to see more content from me, be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent one. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom video is a video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new or see more what you like, then be sure to check both of those out. Also, be sure to check out my Discord because I'm actually had to change some things, but I am going to actually do the watch along still, but it's going to be in Discord rather than Twitch because apparently because I've been doing some research into it, and it's apparently the movie isn't listed as one of the things you can actually watch on Twitch. Apparently it's just like a select list of things, and pay to rent movies aren't on that list. So yeah, we're gonna be watching that in Discord instead. So yeah, just go check that out. Be sure to follow me on. Be sure to go check out my Discord and join that if you want to actually see that. But yeah, overall, thank you guys just so much for watching. And until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.